What's up, guys? My name is Fari, and I build systems that remove bottlenecks within businesses. And I've been documenting my builds since the 1st of June 2025, going all the way up to the 1st of June 2026. And, guys, today's video is all about you don't always get what you want, and that's okay. It's just all about building the reps. Especially, I started this journey, this documenting each and every single day, just talking about systems and how I'm building to ultimately build the moat in terms of thinking and also adding to the execution there. And I realized that, sometimes, you always don't get the moments, the glitz and the glamours, and that's okay. It's just then becomes how can you then redirect your energy towards the things that ultimately, serve as production or serve in the production quadrant. And I say this because, this week has been quite interesting, to be honest. I mean, I've realized so many things that, things that I have gotten wrong, especially this week, in terms of the way that I've been, positioning and saying certain things, and how that is, somewhat been contributing towards the execution there. And I feel like, to be honest with you, I feel like the level of execution in terms of getting to, where I want to get to is, something that I definitely need to improve on. And this week has shown that each and every single day, you're able to learn a lot more, but through that, you learn so much and you're then able to sharpen up. And I think, throughout, my life way before, I probably would have been crippled, by temporary defeat and, just things not going the way that you plan for it to happen, But ultimately, as time has gone on, I've become somewhat, unconscious to, feeling the fear of pain or just ultimately having a higher pain tolerance in terms of, just understanding, hey, you're going to mess up, but you're going to learn so much more. And I found times that, especially throughout this week, especially when I have been, getting a lot of data points through these quote unquote failures, it's ultimately allowed me to sharpen my focus on the things that, I ultimately need to focus on, which is adding more towards the execution there rather than just, adding towards the theoretical or just trying to make it simple. It's somewhat understanding what the balance is and finding that balance between the theoretical aspect of it and the actual practical execution there for it. Because one of the things that I've been focusing a lot more on in recent times is just adding towards the execution there. And I ultimately want to do that, especially with these daily videos, especially since in the beginning we were just talking about mental models and frameworks. But now I think the most important thing moving forward is focusing a lot more on the actual execution and executing each and every single day, because that is where production actively happens, at least in my experience. And using that as the moat that ultimately drives everything else is what I want to change and ultimately improve on. And understanding that sometimes failure is just it's just data, like it's just data that ultimately guides you and tells you that, hey, this is what's not working, but how can you learn from that. I think probably said this in the previous video or so, that I learn a lot more from failing rather than succeeding, and that is more true as time goes on. And sometimes I actually ask for it, inversely, that I ask for these different failure points to ultimately come, because it's just data. I handle these as just data because I understand that the game is everlasting and it never ever truly ends. But you ultimately just have to enjoy the moments, the moments where you feel like, hey, this isn't going the way that I planned, but I'm ultimately learning, and through those learnings you're ultimately getting a lot sharper. And I realized as well that the more reps that we were ultimately getting in, like for example with these daily videos, when I started from day 1 to day 30, I could probably not articulate myself in the same manner, or just make the videos in the same manner that was flowing. And that is okay. You always don't get the reps, don't get the results that you ultimately need. They act as a compounding mode, so they basically compound from just getting more reps in and becoming a sharper operator, and learning from that each and every single day. and getting more super tactical, because I think that's also something that's also super important. How can you, become more tactical in your day to day and ultimately build through that, and letting that, the execution there ultimately, serve as the basis for everything else. And understanding that, you always have this perception, and sometimes you just have to be patient in order to, build the grand vision for whatever it is that you want to build, but realizing that it's not always, smooth sailing. It's just super hard, and accept that it's hard and just build anyways, and just show up each and every single day, because not every day is going to be, super smooth sailing. It's just how can you, build through that. And I think increasing pain tolerance, or tolerance for pain, is another thing. I've been reading or listening to a lot of podcasts lately, and one common theme has been, having a high level of, pain tolerance. And that's something that, is becoming super evident now, for me especially, that each and every single day is a day to increase somewhat of the pain tolerance, such so that it ultimately, allows you to build a lot more. And also just mainly just adding towards the execution there. I think that's the most important thing. Each and every single day is a opportunity to add towards that execution there, and just become a sharper builder, sharper operator, and ultimately just build as a result of that, and communicating that as well. So it's just pulling all these different levers that ultimately allow you to become a sharper operator, and also, a sharper builder as well. I always go in with the approach of I know nothing, but I'm willing to be a sponge and absorb all the knowledge I possibly can, and ultimately just learn as much as I possibly can. Because I realize that, in as much as you have a lot of knowledge about a certain thing, there's always so much more and so much deeper you can get. And how deep can you get just by, asking more questions and digging a lot deeper down. And I know through that, it's ultimately going to scale as time goes on, but we're ultimately just going to understand that, and ultimately, make sure that we are constantly pushing the needle forward and failing a lot more, such so that we can get those data points that ultimately allow us to build better into the future. And this is something I've also thought about a while, that it's so much better to fail now rather than failing later, in the sense that, you're actively building those reps, such so that, the bigger it gets, the more you can handle. And I think this is evidently true, from, if I compare myself now and I compare myself, a couple years ago, each and every single year it just gets, the level of intensity just goes up by magnitude. But ultimately it allows me to become a sharper builder and a sharper operator. And each and every single day, the mission stays the same. It's how much can, we do on a day to day, and learn, gather those data points, and ultimately build into the future. And I know we're going to get there, without a shadow of a doubt, but ultimately just becoming better, collecting all the data points, and ultimately just, pushing the needle forward each and every single day. It's never failure. It's never quote unquote failure. It's mostly temporary defeat masked as failure, and you just have to continue to build through that. And just making sure that each and every single day you're gathering those data points, because those data points are vital towards you getting to the grand vision for whatever it is that you're ultimately building for. And yeah, if you guys enjoy this video, make sure to check out my newsletter. I've also got my links to my socials if you want to connect with me down below. And I will see you guys in the next video.